Hello and welcome to this episode of Sabbath Worship with Ben. Hope you all enjoy it, and as usual, we'll have a lesson this week. Hope you all will have a blessed Sabbath. In this week's lesson, Paul is speaking to the Thessalonians, and he's talking to them about after his visit to them, where he established a church there. He and those who were with him working to spread the gospel left, and so Paul is writing a letter to them now, the first of the two letters that we have that he wrote. So in this part of the letter we're studying this week, he tells them that he and those with him, his brothers and sisters in Christ, had come to show them how they should live, and through Jesus, how they could live upright lives. And now he was asking them to live even better than what he had originally told them as they were growing and developing in Christ. He asked them to abstain from immorality in relationships with others, and asked them to refrain from the lust that they had, and he mentions how previously they were pagans, they were Gentiles, and they didn't know what they were doing, so they were caught up in their lust, and they did whatever they felt was right. But now God, he says, has called them to a higher calling, to be better than that, so to speak, and to overcome those desires and passions through Jesus. He warns them that if anyone rejects this message, that they'll really be rejecting God, since it's God's message. But he commends them because it says that they have great love for each other and for all the people in Macedonia. But he asks them to restrain their ambitions, to lead a quiet life, and to continue to grow, and to have the kind of life that God asks of them, to be quiet, to work diligently, and he encourages them to continue spreading the message, to continue in their love for all people. Finally, Paul encourages the Christians at Thessalonians by summarizing the message of the gospel. He talks about how Jesus came and how they all have the promise of salvation, which those who are in the world grieve, he says, because they don't have any hope. They're unable to receive the message because they don't believe. But they have the promise that they can, and the hope of Jesus' return. And he encourages them to stay strong, to cling to Jesus, and he asks them to continue in the message so that they can receive of the hope which they all cherish. So he encourages them, and he asks them to continue in the faith. So this week's lesson is really just a message of encouragement. Paul was sending a message to Thessalonians, but he also was trying to encourage them, and he made it clear that his interests were that they grow more in Christ, and that a relationship, and that their experience be improved. That's the lesson for this week, really, is that you should take Paul's advice, abstain from immorality, and to follow God's commands, to cherish love for one another and for all people, and to keep the hope of Christ's soon return. That's all I have for this week. Hope it was a blessing, and I hope you all will stay safe and have a blessed day. Bye. Hello and welcome to this episode of Sabbath Worship with Ben. Hope you all enjoy it, and as usual we'll have a lesson and a presentation. Hope you all will have a blessed Sabbath. This week's lesson is entitled The Inspiring Minority. As we talked about last week, Paul went all over the old world to travel to speak of Jesus, and on one occasion, he and some of the believers were in Ephesus, and of course Paul was trying to educate the people and tell them about Jesus Christ and to encourage them to accept the new life and to be converted. So, however, there were some people who didn't like what Paul was trying to do. So, there was a man who was named Demetrius, and he was a worker in the shrines who built many shrines of silver for the goddess Artemis, the Greek god. And so they made a lot of money from this because this was in Greece. So many of the people were, majority probably, were Greek, and so they make this craftsman business was very profitable. So he gathered together all of the workers who worked in this field and who were related, and he told them about Paul was trying to convert the people and to lead them into false doctrine, he said. And that not only would it hurt their business, but it would deface their god, because this was like the main god that they worshipped was Artemis in Ephesus. So when the people heard this, they went into a great uproar. No, they were so upset that they took to the streets and they gathered people as a mob, and they started shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," all throughout the city. So many people were caught up in the crowd, but most didn't even know it was happening. So eventually they came to the city center, and so some of the Jews who were in the crowd tried to speak to the people, but they wouldn't stop shouting it, and they kept shouting it for almost 2 hours. Paul wanted to go and to speak to the people, but the Christians who were there refused to let him speak for fear of that the mob would seize him. So eventually the city clerk went up before the people and calmed them, told them that they were in danger of being revolting, in question of being in revolt because of their actions. He told them to calm down and that they all knew that Artemis was the great god, so there was no need to proclaim it. So the people were calmed and they returned home. And so the crisis was averted. But the real lesson from this story is about how people in the world are always going to be opposed to what we have to say as Christians. And so sometimes it'll be quiet, sometimes it'll be loud. So we've been looking at many different kinds of receptions to Paul's message as he traveled. And the important part to remember is that Paul never gave up faith, and he always continued to spread the message to whoever would listen. So as we're witnessing, we shouldn't let the pressure, so to speak, get to us. What we should do instead is trust in God to deliver us and to take care of us, that we can be His faithful witnesses, share the message even if we face opposition. The message is to remember that we'll always have to face opposition, so we should go to the Lord for strength to endure it. That's the lesson for this week. Now I'm going to do my presentation for this week. It's going to be based off of Romans chapter 8. Going to be looking at what Jesus has done for us compared to the law. It says, starting at verse 1, "There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus hath made me free from the law of sin and death. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, God sending his own Son in the likeness of sinful flesh, and for sin, condemned sin in the flesh. So this first part is saying is that basically those who are in Jesus aren't condemned because they walk after the Spirit, and now they're no longer living on the carnal nature. So the Spirit has made us free from the law of sin and death. So the old part of us that was ruled by sin is in the carnal nature is now gone. So what the law, which is the law of like the law that was given to Moses, to the children of Israel, it couldn't do, which was weak through the flesh, which basically means that the physical law, which was just words basically, which had a good meaning, but it was weak, which means that we couldn't follow it. God sent his own Son in flesh so that sin could be condemned, and it says in verse 4, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. So now we can have the righteousness of the law through Jesus, who fulfills the law, and now we can be fulfilled in us as well, because we have Jesus' Spirit in us. For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh, but they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. So those who are in carnal nature think carnally, but those who have Jesus can see beyond those carnal things. So to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. So before we had sin, and as we said, the wages of sin are death. But now that we have Jesus, we can have life and peace. That's just a quick reminder for us, is that it's not the law that saves us, but Jesus in us and through us is what cleanses us from all unrighteousness. So let's remember that this week, to go to Jesus to cleanse us and to save us from our unrighteousness. That's it for this week. Hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all will stay safe until next week. Bye.